Good morning and welcome to your final recorded maths lesson, because tomorrow is a live one. So this is our final ever maths lesson recorded. Fingers crossed, hopefully. Right, so today we're going to try and bring together everything we've been doing this week, and we're going to try and solve some problems involving converting lengths. I'm going to do it alongside you, so don't worry, and you're still going to see some of those familiar pages just to remind you. So let's have a look at some of those to start with. Okay, first of all, remember timesing by 10 and timesing by 10 again is the same as timesing by 100. Timesing by 10, timesing by 10 and timesing by 10 again is the same as timesing by 1,000. And that's of course also the same as timesing by 10 and timesing by 100, because the 100 is made up of the two lots of 10. So all of those you need to try and remember. Dividing by 10 and dividing by 10 is the same as dividing by 100. Dividing by 10, dividing by 10, dividing by 10 is the same as dividing by 1,000. And dividing by 10 and then divided by 100 is also the same as dividing by 1,000. So just remember on your place value chart, where's my pen? There it is. On your place value chart, to multiply by 10, you move it one place. To multiply by 100, you move it two places. But that's also the same as multiplying by 10 and then multiplying by 10 again. Okay, so that 7 would move twice. And then of course you'd fill in your placeholders. And doing it 3 times is the same as timesing it by 1,000, and I'd go off the edge, wouldn't I? And then of course going backwards is the same as dividing by 100 or 1,000. Okay, so you've just really got to try and remember those. Okay, we've been getting really good at this, hopefully. So to go from a smaller unit to a larger unit, you divide. Okay, so centimetres to metres, there are 100 centimetres in a metre, so you divide by 100, because centimetres are smaller, metres are bigger. Millimetre to centimetre, there are 10 millimetres in a centimetre, so you divide by 100. Metres to kilometres, there are 1,000 metres in a kilometre, so you divide by 1,000. And then the reverse, to go the other way, to go from the bigger unit to the smaller unit, you multiply. Metres to centimetres, 100. Centimetres to millimetres, 10. Kilometres to metres, multiply by 100. It's really important that you remember those. And finally, here are the units we've been looking at, just to show you how many are in each. We've mainly concentrated on length this week. Tomorrow we're going to have a look at capacity and mass together in our live lesson. But in 1 litre, there are 1,000 millilitres. Remember, milli means 1,000. In 1 kilogram, there are 1,000 grams. Remember, kilo means 1,000. What I find quite interesting is in capacity, you have the 1,000 part in the smaller, where's my mouse? Here. You have the 1,000 part in the smaller unit, whereas in the mass, you have the 1,000 part in the larger unit, in the kilo. I find that quite interesting. And then the same with length, there's the 1,000, so it's 1,000 metres. And centi, you have the cent in the centimetres to show there are 100 in a metre, but you also have the milli here to show there are 1,000 millimetres in a metre. And we also have 10 millimetres in 1 centimetre. Okay, so you might have just noticed a change of location here. Right, we're going to start with some revision. Again, so this is something we looked at yesterday. So what we're looking at here is converting metres into kilometres. So we're going from a smaller to a larger. The metre is the smaller and we want to convert it to a larger. So what are we going to do? Are we going to multiply? Are we going to divide? We're going to divide. So to start with, this red box, we are going to, where's my pen there? So for this red box, we're going to be dividing, okay? What are we going to be dividing by? How many meters in a kilometre? Kilo. We're going to divide by 1,000. Okay, so 1,200 divided by 1,000. There are lots of different ways I can approach this. First of all, I can think, well, I've already got 1,000 there, and there's only one of them. It doesn't get up to 2,000, so it's got to be 1 point something, hasn't it? And then I can remember that actually the digits don't change, do they? We just move them. And because the next digit is a 2, it must be 1.2. And then I've got those 2 zeros on the end, but I don't need them. They can go. So 1.2. I could think of it like that, or I could think of it as a place value chart. Hundreds, tens, ones, decimal place, tenths. So I could think I've got 1,200. How many places am I going to be moving it? Well, I'm moving it to the right because I'm dividing. 1,000 has got 3 zeros, so I'm going to move them 3 places. Now those zeros I'm going to ignore because they're going to fall off the end. So the 2 is going to go 1, 2, jump over the decimal point to the tenths. So my 2 would move to the tenths. And then the 1 would move 1, 2, 3 places to the ones. And then of course I need my decimal point, 1.2. And then we need our unit of measurement on the end, kilometres. Okay, actually we'll keep that bit. Right, the other way of looking at, now we're going to be converting 2,290. Now, the thing to remember here is that you've got to use all the digits. What a lot of people do is forget about that second 9, and you can't do that. You need to use all the digits. So I can think of it again as, well, I know I've got 2,000. So I know I've got 2 full thousands here. So it's going to be 2 point something. Without using a place value chart, what do you think it will be? 2 point what? It doesn't go up to 3,000, so it can't be 3. 2 point, remember the digits don't change, they just move. So it's going to be 2.99 kilometres. We've got to use both the 9s. You can't get rid of any digits unless it's a 0 that's just going to be used as a placeholder. So we've got to have both those 9s because they would both move 3 places to the right. So it's 2.99. Now we're going to be doing the opposite. So this time, instead of multiplying, we're going from a bigger unit to a smaller unit. I didn't mean instead of multiplying, sorry, I meant instead of dividing, we're now going to multiply. So this time we're going to multiply by 1,000 because there are 1,000 meters in a kilometre. So we're going to move them 3 places for those 3 zeros to the left. So 3.6 hundreds, tens, ones and tenths. 3.6 is going to move 1, 2, 3 places into the thousands. And then the 6 will move 1, 2, 3 places into the hundreds. Oh, that's not a 6. There we go. Now, are those digits, are we done? We're not, are we? Because if we left it like that, it would just be 36. So, of course, we've got to fill up with placeholders. So it's 3,600 meters. The other way we can look at it is to think, well, I know I've got 3 holes there, and 3 holes would be 3,000 meters. So I know it's going to be 3,000 and something, and then the 6 tells me what the something is. Let's try, oh, look at this. We've got 3 decimal places here, 3 decimal places. Okay, so I know I've got here 2 full kilometers because it's 2 point something. So that means it's going to be 2,000 and something. Well, to give me 2,000 and something, I'm going to need 3 more digits. And look, I've got 3 more digits there. So it's lovely and easy. We just fill in those 3 digits. So it will be 2,758 meters. It's quite easy when you remember how many places you're moving it and that the digits don't change. They just move. Only the zeros might change. Okay, we started looking at this yesterday and we're going to have another look today because it is confusing. And as I say, I only learnt this recently. Of and multiply mean the same thing. In terms of fractions and decimals, of and multiply mean the same. So if a question says, what is 5/10 of a kilometre, it's exactly the same as saying 5/10 times 1 kilometre. They are the same, okay? So let's have a look at where 5/10 would be. We've got 10 sections here, so each of these must be worth 1 out of 10, 1/10. This one would be 2 out of 10, wouldn't it? Can you put your finger where 5 out of 10 would be, 5/10? It would be halfway here, 5 out of 10. That's where our 5/10 point would be. Okay. Also, we know that 1/10 is the same as 0.1. They're equivalent, which means what's the decimal for 5/10? 0.5, isn't it? They are the same. Okay, so what the question is asking us is, what is 5/10 of a kilometre? Right, so because it's the halfway point, it's actually really easy to work out. 1 kilometre is 1,000 metres. So what's half of that? What's half of 1,000? Half of 1,000 is 500. I don't really need to work out all of the individual tenths to tell me that. It's just halfway. So 5/10 of a kilometre is 500 metres. 0.5 of a kilometre is 500 metres. 5/10 times 1 kilometre is 500 metres. 0.5 times 1 kilometre is 500 metres. They were all the same. Okay, let's look at this one. Remember, of and multiply mean the same. So 58 hundredths of a kilometre is the same as 58 hundredths times 1 kilometre. Or 0.58 of a kilometre is the same as 0.58 times a kilometre. And because 58 hundredths is 0.58, all 4 answers will be the same. So once we've found out one, we've got them all. Okay, so we're working in hundredths this time. So remember, our denominator is going to be 100. And so I've split my diagram here, not into 10 sections, but into 100 sections. You can still see the 10 sections by the colours, but each of those is split into 10. Okay, so I've got 10 lots of 10 to give me 100. Okay, so if 3 is here, how many out of 100 is that, Mark? That will be 10 out of 100, won't it? So that will be 20 out of 100. So where do you think 50 out of 100 will be? Can you put your finger where 50 out of 100 would be? 50 hundredths would be the halfway mark, wouldn't it? Because 50 is half of 100. Now, what's a little bit confusing here is we're working out of 100, but actually there are 1,000 kilometres, 1,000 metres in a kilometre. So that means that each hundredth is not actually worth 100 here. What's each hundredth worth? Each hundredth, can you work it out? Each hundredth is actually worth 10. So this isn't, where it says 10 hundredths, we've actually got 100 metres. It's very confusing. So 20 hundredths is actually 200 metres because we're actually working out of 1,000 even though they're hundredths. That does get a little bit confusing when you think of it like that. Okay, we've got 50 out of 100. So 60 out of 100 would be here. But we want 58 out of 100. Where do you think 58 would be? Well, it's going to be between 50 and 60 hundredths, isn't it? So 58, I think, would be there. I think that is going to be 58 out of 100, 58 hundredths. Now, what is 58 hundredths of a kilometre? It's not 58, because do you remember I just said that each hundredth is worth 10, because 100 tens make our 1,000. If each hundredth was only worth 100, we'd only get to 10, wouldn't we? Sorry, we'd only get to 100. If each hundredth was worth 1, we'd only get to 100. Each tenth is worth 100. It gets very confusing when you think of it like this. Each tenth is worth 100. So now we've got to think what each hundredth is worth. So each hundredth is worth 10. So that would be 310 there. So here are 58. Well, this would be worth 500. This would be worth 600, which means our 58 out of 100 would actually be worth 580 out of 1,000 in this case. It's very, very confusing. Let's look at that again, because I know that I will have confused a few of you there. Okay, so we're going to look at this once more, because I know I would have confused some of you. Here we've got tenths, haven't we? 0.1 or 1/10, 0.2 or 2/10. And to make up our 1,000 metres, each of those has got to be worth 1/10 of 1,000. If I divide 1,000 by 10, it's 100. So each of those has got to be worth 100 metres. So I would have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, and then 1,000. Okay, so in between those, each little line, can it be worth 1? It can't be, can it? Because if each was worth 1, I'd only get to 110 by the time I got to here, and I've got to get to 200. So how much is each little line worth? It's worth 10. So that's 110. The next one is 120. Oh, can't see that very clearly. The next one is 120. The next one is 130, and so on. Okay, but we also say that that is 1/10 of the whole diagram, or 0.1, which means here is 0.5 or 5/10, and that halfway point. Okay, hopefully this is making it a little bit clearer now. So I want 58 out of 100, which is going to be between our 5/10 and our 6/10, because we're now looking at the individual lines, because they're the hundredths. So 58 out of 100 would be, let me choose another colour, would be here. 58 out of 100. You can't have 5.8 over 10. You can't have a decimal with a fraction. That doesn't work. You can't do that. So instead, we take it out of 100. Okay, so 50 out of 100, well, I can see that 500 here is 600 is here. So it can't be 58. We've got to make it 10 times bigger. So it's actually 580 metres. And as we said, they're all the same, all 4 of those. It's tricky, isn't it? Okay, we're now looking at metres and centimetres. So we're going back to thinking of there only being 100 this time. Cent is 100. So we've got to get used to switching between them. So that means each tenth is worth what? 1/10 or 0.1. What's that worth? can you tell me if it starts at 0 and goes up to 100 and there are 10 of them, each tenth is worth 10. It's actually quite simple this time. So that would be 20, 30, etc. all the way up to 100 centimetres. So we want 9/10. Can you put your finger where you think 9/10 would be? 9/10 of a metre. It will be here. Okay, this line here is 9/10. And all of these are the same. 9/10 of a metre, 0.9 of a metre, 9/10 times 1 metre, 0.9 times 1 metre. Of and times mean the same. So how many centimetres would that be? 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, 70, 90. 90 centimetres. That was a bit easier than the last one we did. Okay, back to hundredths again. Of and times mean the same, but this time we're looking at metres and centimetres. So this time, how many centimetres are there in a metre? There are 100. This makes it easier because each of these is now worth 1. Before, when there were 1,000, they were all worth 10, but now they are actually worth 1 because there are 100 centimetres. So this one is super simple. Right. 0.1 would be here, 0.2 would be here. Can you tell me where 0.8 would be? Let's start with just 0.8. Put your finger there. It would be here, 0.8. So 0.82, which is what we want, would be here. Just 2 after it. And because each little line is just worth 1, that would be how many centimetres? Just 82. 82 centimetres. It's got to be smaller than 100, hasn't it? Because there are 100 in a metre. All these are the same. 82 hundredths of a metre, 0.82 of a metre, 82 hundredths times 1 metre, 0.82 times 1 metre. They're all the same. Right, look at what we're trying to work out now. Centimetres into millimetres. How many millimetres in a centimetre? Don't let milli confuse you this time, because milli links with metres actually. So there are just 10. One of those tiny little measurements on your ruler, there are just 10 of them. So we're looking at 10 millimetres equals 1 centimetre, as it says here. Well, how many is each of these worth? It's just worth 1, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're all just worth 1. So if this is 0.1, put your finger where 0.8 would be. 0.8 would be here. So if each one is worth 1, how many millimetres is that mark there? 8/10 of a centimetre is 8 millimetres. 0.8 of a centimetre is 8 millimetres. 1 centimetre times 8/10 is 8 millimetres. 1 centimetre times 0.8 is 8 millimetres. Notice this time I've put the centimetre first on these bottom two, and that's because multiplication is commutative. You can do them in either order, and the same goes here with multiplying with a fraction or a decimal. You can put either one first. Okay, pause here and see if you can work out these. Now they are all different, but they're all with kilometres, so they're not going to be the same answers. I want 4 different answers this time, okay? But you are working with kilometres. Of and multiply mean the same thing, so don't let the of and the multiply confuse you. It just means the same thing. What I will help you out with is that there are 10 sections. So 1,000 divided by 10 is 100. So each of these sections is worth 100. So that would be 0.1 or 1/10, and that's worth 100. So I'll help you out with that bit. So pause and have a go at these. Let's have a look at the answers to these together. So first of all, please remember that of and multiplied mean the same thing in this context. When we're talking about multiplying by a fraction or multiplying by a decimal, of means the same thing. So here are the answers. Now, they were tricky. They were all working with kilometres, so it was all working within 1,000 metres being a kilometre, but they were all different this time. So 9/10 of a kilometre. Well, 9/10 would be all the way over here, wouldn't it? 9 out of 10 sections. There's our 9/10, which is also 0.9. Okay, so we've got to think about what each section is worth. They're not worth 1 because that would only give us 10 metres. They're not worth 10 because that would only give us 100 metres. So each section is worth 100 metres. Then we would get our 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900 up to 1,000. So each section is worth 900 metres, which means, sorry, it's because the year sixes are being noisy outside and I'm listening to them. Each section is worth 100 metres, which means 9/10 would be 900 metres. So that's our first one. Right, then rather than a fraction, we've got a decimal, 0.8. 0.8 is the same as 8/10, which would be here. So if 9/10 were 900 metres, 8/10 would be 800 metres. And then we've got 1 kilometre times 0.3. Don't forget, times means the same as of. So it's exactly what we've just done. 0.3, there's 0.1, there's 0.2, there's 0.3, which is also 3/10. So if each section is worth 100, we've come along 3 sections, so that would be 300 metres. And let's just clear some space off. And the last one is 1/10, which is the same as 0.1. That would be here, 0.1 or 1/10. And if each section is worth 100, it's just one section, so it's 100 metres. Okay, here you've got some more questions. I am hiding the letter M, so under me it's 9/100ths of 1 kilometre. I'm hiding that one. So look at the second set of questions now. We've just answered these ones. Now you're looking at this section here. It's a little bit trickier now because you're working in hundredths. So what you've got to do is split in your head, split each of these into 10 sections, and each of those would be worth how many? 10. So each of these would be worth 10 sections, 10 metres, sorry, so that one whole section is worth 100 metres. Okay, so you've got 78 hundredths, then 0.25, 1.34, and then 9 hundredths. Please remember the digits don't change, they just move. Right, here are the answers to these ones. I've disappeared so that you can see them all. So 78 hundredths of 1 kilometre. So 7 out of 10, 7/10 would be here. That's 7/10. 8/10 would be here, and it's going to be in the middle. It's going to be around there. So if 7/10 is 700, 78 hundredths would be 780. I hope you got that one. 0.25. Now 0.25 is a quarter. So I can also think, what's a quarter of 1,000? A quarter of 1,000 is 250. Or I can think of it as multiplying by 1,000. What is 0.25 multiplied by 1,000? I'd move each digit 3 places, which would give me 250. Here I've got 1 kilometre times 1.34. Now I've already got a whole kilometre there. So it's going to be 1,000 and something. It's not going to be 1,034 because I'm multiplying the whole thing by 1,000. So this whole number multiplied by 1,000, I'm going to move in 3 places, which would give me 1,340. All the digits are still there, but we need the 0 as the placeholder. You could have also said 1 kilometre, 340 metres. But do be careful. If it asks for it in metres, it's that top one you want. So if it says, what is this in metres, go for the top one. And then finally, 9 hundredths. That's all the way over here. 10 hundredths is there, which is the same as 1/10. So 9 hundredths is all the way down there. It's not 9. Be really careful. It's not 9 because each of these is worth 10. If you remember, each of these hundredths is worth 10. So it's actually 90. As a decimal, it would be 0.09. There's my 9 hundredths here because it's in the hundredths column. And if you multiplied that by 1,000, you wouldn't get 9, you'd get 90. So that was a bit tricky, that last one.